All right. Welcome back to Propel Education Podcast, where we spotlight the leaders, innovators, and disruptors shaping the future of K-12 learning across the country. Today, we're diving into one of the most important and rapidly evolving areas in education, teacher training, which is really an exciting topic. Across the country, some of the best districts are rethinking professional development for teachers, moving beyond one-size-fits-all workshops and coaching to collaboration and experiential learning for teachers. And few people kind of understand how to evolve in this space. And so we're excited to have Phu Trânchí, head of school at Tree Academy in Los Angeles, with us today, talking about his experience and the work that they're doing to support students and teachers. So Phu has spent more than 2 decades designing transformative learning environments, developing teacher leaders, and championing educational approaches that honor curiosity, creativity, and really allow us to apply it to the work that we do as educators. So I'm super excited to have him here today, and I would love for you to start by introducing yourself, talk a little bit about Tree Academy, what you do there in the school. You're in a highly populated area in Los Angeles. I would imagine serving a very diverse population of students. So I'd just love to know how you came into education and, like the things you're doing to really like lift yourself up and the staff. That's the first question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Inger. I'm really excited to speak to you. Always excited to speak to colleagues and peers, educational leaders,
For being
about
here.
the state of education, where we're going, and everything. So, my name is again Phu Trânchí. I go by pronouns he, him, and I'm the head of school of Tree Academy here in West Hollywood in Los Angeles. And we are a independent school, grades 6 through 12, a very small school. We have a population of near 100 students for grade 6 through 12. So small school, small class sizes, individualized attention. Our pillars are individualized, innovative, experiential education. That's kind of where we hang our hat. Our goal is, this is my second year here at Tree Academy, having come from the Oakwood School in North Hollywood, my previous 13 years. And previous to that, I was at another school as an administrator for 11 years. So I've been around for a while, and before that, I had my roots in the Peace Corps, and that's really kind of where. And I was a teacher in the Peace Corps, and so sort of my also upbringing. My mother's a lifetime Montessori educator, so I kind of have this proclivity towards hands-on experiential learning, constructivist learning, and so that's
Yeah.
been my sensibility throughout life. And reinforced by my experiences in the Peace Corps, and then kind of my somewhat of a meandering journey as a teacher, being more traditional when I began, and then when I again came into leadership, then I started to see things a little bit differently, and then
Hmm.
really it was my experience also then in graduate school at UCLA, in the educational leadership program that allowed me to spend time with a cohort of educators K through 20, pre-K through 20, really. And that really was eye-opening in terms of being able to see the entire landscape at once and spend time looking at the entire landscape at once. It's not
Yeah.
something that educators often get to do. My experience previous to that had been just focused on high school. So being able to, see the entire journey of the child in that way into adulthood was extremely eye-opening, and seeing what people are doing. It was both private and independent. Again, pre early childhood all the way through higher education. So those are sort of my formative experiences in what I do. And I came into experiential learning over the last, I would say, decade. I've been delving into and becoming a little bit more trained, and to a place where I feel pretty solid expertise in
Yeah.
what we're doing in the pedagogy. I want to name the IC network, which is the Independent Schools Experiential Education Network, really huge part of being in that network, but also learning again from peers and collaboration. And really that's, I think, the name of the game today, right? For teacher training. It's
Yeah.
that's how we learn best is authentic collaboration.
Yeah, I
You know,
appreciate that.
yeah.
So I have a couple of questions for you. Given your trajectory into experiential education and thinking about how you overlay all of your experience in the different settings you've been in and bringing that into the Tree Academy as like a school of thought, what does that look like for the teachers, right? And were they pretty excited about the new way that you all would be approaching professional development for teachers? And can you kind of define the framework for how you did implementation? Like, what did it look like? You just, named a organization you'd worked
Uh-huh.
with to kind of support the foundational principles of the work. So, can you talk a little bit about that? How you built it? How teachers were teachers leaning in, or was there some resistance to like, what is this new thing?
Yeah, I mean, frankly speaking, there was a lot of questioning, what exactly. I think, we hear the term experiential learning, experiential education. More recently it's shifted a bit, but it's been often associated with outdoor education. So a lot
Mm,
of people, I think, tend to think of it as outdoor education. That was the connotation several years ago, and now I think the general version of it is hands-on education. And for me, it just comes down very simply. We call it innovative, and I know I'm pushing, but it's Dewey. So I
mm,
actually go all the way back, and Dewey said, we don't learn from experience, we learn by reflecting on experience.
yeah.
And that's always core. And there's experiential learning pedagogy, and different cycles that I try to bring teachers through. So the way I try to intentionally design PD around experiential learning is actually to do experiential learning, and experiential learning is that it's learning by doing, not learning about. So one of the most important things for me to really introduce my teachers in a new environment, to introduce a new faculty into this idea where there were a lot of questions, and frankly, they weren't very sure about what we were going to do and what I was about. They'd seen a little bit of my work, and heard and read about me. But it was really about, okay, let's go do this. And
Mhm.
one of my core tenets around it is when we as educators continue to approach teaching and education in general as humble learners, then that's when we're most effective.
Yeah.
And so I try to model that, and so put them into a slightly uncomfortable learning experience that is out there. And so
Mm.
one of the first things that we did is something that not a lot of people are aware that you can do, but you can kayak the LA River. People think of the LA River as kind of this concrete.
Wow.
Yes, and most of it is because it was designed to do that, was redesigned to do that.
Yeah.
But there are places that have been rewilded that you can kayak, and so I took the teachers out. It was one of the very first things that I did
Yeah.
during our opening meetings was to take them out and kayak the LA River and learn about the history of the LA River. And that's
Wow.
it. And so, it's grounded in not just that experience, but also in place-based learning and phenomenon-based learning. And so, really putting them in that experience and then taking them through the cycle so that they're experiencing what it is,
Yeah.
and I'm asking them to deal with those feelings, on a very simple level. Experiential learning is do, feel, observe, think, and that's what I wanted them to do on a very simple level.
Yeah, I love that. When you think about the implementation of the experiential learning and just taking them out for that experience, were there feelings that came up for people? Were people really excited? Were they kind of like, I didn't even know we could do this in our community? Like, can you talk a little bit about like that transition? Because sometimes it's like an aha moment. People don't know what they
Yeah,
don't know until they know, right? And
yeah,
sometimes you got to show by doing, like you said, show people, stretch people. And I think that that's part of leadership sometimes is putting yourselves in uncomfortable situations where you got to
absolutely.
get new people to trust you and to believe in a vision to be able to do the work together. And that's what you were doing. So I think, can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, there's the whole gamut of feelings to like, what is he even talking about? What are we doing? Why would we do this? Why would we take
Yeah.
to go do this? And I didn't know we can do that. I'm excited to do that. I had heard about it. And so, again, one of the other things about experiential learning is leveraging the community, leveraging the city as our campus, leveraging our environments. As I said, place-based learning. And so, introducing this idea that we can learn about this and taking them out for the experience, and it was what's great about it. And this is what we talk about all the time with our students learning, right? Was that they forgot that they were out there for a learning experience, right? They were out there
Hmm.
and enjoying the experience for it. It didn't there was a moment of forgetting that it was work, right? And then
Yeah.
coming
That's the
back
best.
then and coming back together, always important is that post-experience debrief and the reflection piece. And for me, it was like I knew it was starting to sink in because then they were thinking about the extensions of, how they could connect it to their class or to this class or then to a different experience and the other
Hmm.
things that it made them think of. And that to me was the most critical aspect of it is just like, okay, we've had this one snippet, this one little experience, and we could build a curriculum just around this, right? That would
Yeah.
expand across. And so that was really important for me to plant that seed early on. And I think that that's the whole basis of experiential learning is that, it's continuing to introduce and open possibilities,
Yeah.
and getting us to kind of stretch certainly outside the box, but really
Yeah.
just to stretch in terms of like what does learning look like? What is our learning informed by? What is
Yeah.
the how, what is the how we teach informed by? And and for me it's always about looking for ways to kind of push back on that and to get teachers to think about, are you doing this by default? You're doing this because you think you should, it's
Hmm.
questioning and that's a huge part of experiential learning.
Yeah, and I love that sense of curiosity that you kind of weave through is that keeping them curious about opportunities, stretching themselves, leaning into asking questions. Also, I feel like there's a lot of empathy in that, empathy and vulnerability, and like,
Absolutely.
asking questions and being vulnerable enough to say, like, this is new. How do I bring this into my classroom, right? Because I feel like you're teaching them and you're showing up, you're setting up a framework for them to hopefully take it and utilize, like implement it with students, right?
That's
Is
right.
that the
That's right.
idea by teachers? Sometimes as adults, we forget how to have fun. We forget, all of it becomes very, very clinical because that is sometimes our way of looking at things. And to be able to kind of evolve and recognize that there's an opportunity to kind of lean back into that youthfulness of like curiosity, imagination.
Absolutely.
And you built what it sounds like to me is you built a really strong leadership pipeline in your teachers. And now if they're able to implement it in the classroom, they're able to allow students to show up in a really authentic way that serves everybody. So, can you talk a little bit about that? How you've seen the work that you've done initially showing up throughout the work that teachers have been doing with students? And how is it showing up for them? Has it changed outcomes? Are kids more engaged? Is attendance up? Is there any direct correlation to that framework and the student outcomes you all have set for yourselves?
Yeah, again, it's remind again, it's all those things that you spoke to, bringing teachers back into that learner mindset, right? Being students themselves, being on the water, being uncomfortable paddling, and then needing to support each other, for example, or even just splashing each other and having fun, right?
Right.
Inhabiting that space of like this is what joyful learning looks like. And when your mindset is in this, when your head is in this space, you're so much more receptive to the learning around you. And so that's what we try to build into then these joyful experiences. And when we look at individualizing for students, it's really introducing opportunities for them to connect to the questions that they have, the curiosities that they have, and really for me trying to untether and unleash teachers to really lean into those opportunities
Yeah.
and follow the students. And just like my intention really is to unleash the teachers so that I can follow them and what they
Yeah.
want to do and what they need and in terms of that teacher training of just, I want them to show me the way. I don't want
Yeah.
to tell them what to do. I don't want to prescribe for them what to do. I want to build a relationship where we are seeing each other and meeting each other as individuals and where you now are trusting me to help guide, your growth and your learning based upon, your understanding of my journey and how I've supported others along the way. And so how can I support you? And then once they do that, like Steve Jobs said, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire
Yes.
smart people so they can tell us what to
That's what
do.
to do.
And so,
Yeah.
that's really what I'm looking for. I know that I also always say, I would never, I wouldn't teach teachers to teach how I taught because it was just like so unique to me and my identity, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
how I knew I could connect with kids, and I know that that's not going to be true for every teacher. So, it's harder to do, obviously, in a larger scale. But when you
Hmm.
have an opportunity within a smaller community, or to create smaller subgroups, professional learning groups, within a larger community, to make that to invest in those relationships, to see the humans versus the workers, to value the humans versus the workers, then it opens up a different type of dynamic and relationship. And then
Mhm.
again, it's as you spoke to, for me, it's everything is that whole being and that empathy.
Yeah.
And when you have, especially in this profession and what we do,
Yeah.
it's everything in what we do, right? And so we have to, for me, it's constantly reminding and bringing back to that sense. And then obviously there are tensions and challenges around that as well.
Yeah. So one of the things you spoke about really made me think of the work we do in our district around liberatory design, which is a framework around
Hmm.
modes and mindsets. And I totally, when you were talking, co-design came up a lot for me, doing it with the folks most impacted by the work and not doing it from the top down, which oftentimes doesn't always land. So I would love for you, if you could, it sounds like you're doing a lot of coaching. You've got, like you said, a small school with how many staff do you have?
We have 20.
You have 20 staff. And so from your experience, when you are effectively coaching teachers and coaching as in I'm leaning into more like collaborating, like
Yeah.
co-facilitating the work, being a thought partner, asking questions, looking at data, recognizing that there's stories that need to bubble up so people can understand how to do the work better. How do you approach it from a place where they're able to grow and learn, and also like do better, right? So
Yeah.
that it's like, okay, I trust Fu enough to sit with me, tell me what I don't know, and then go out and like do the thing that needs to be done. And for me, the umbrella is like accountability, because
Yeah.
sometimes that just doesn't often show up consistently for teachers. It's a little
Yeah.
haphazard in like larger systems. So what does that
Absolutely.
look like for you and your staff?
Yeah, it's touch points, follow up. It's the communication piece. It's it again, I think it's always framed best, and our philosophy here with our students is individualized attention, individualized learning. And with a faculty of 20, again, that's a luxury that I have that I can
Yeah,
attend to. And obviously there's a lot going on, and I not doing it to the level, but I have a team that helps and supports me in leveraging as many opportunities as possible. It's the time investment. It's,
hmm,
if I'm going to do this, people a lot of times, like in business, people say, or we talk about following the money, right? If you're looking at budgets and to see where the priorities are, well,
yeah,
follow your time. Are you spending all your time reading emails and answering emails, or are you spending time actually in classrooms working with teachers,
yes,
talking to teachers?
yeah,
And so, and being open with the calendar. We talked about that in a panel that I was on recently of just like this, having an open calendar where you can see that, okay, I've got a bunch of meetings lined up with teachers like this entire week. That's
yeah,
my focus. And you can see that that's where my attention is. That messaging is important as well. But in terms of the individual coaching and, it's again, for what I've tried to do so much, and again to have thought partners that support me in this, is trying to divest in the typical systems. That's how you started off with, right? The typical training systems, that one size
mhm,
fits all mechanism. And what can I do to try to continue to be more authentic and connected to the individual,
yeah,
to the learner in the teacher, and not just the worker again.
yeah,
And a big part of that is, for example, I shifted like the mid-year kind of evaluative observation process. And so instead of just the typical classroom observation, then follow up, we all know that as soon as an administrator comes in with their clipboard or their notepad or their laptop in the classroom, it's no longer the same classroom, right? And it will
Mhm.
never be that same classroom. And so, yeah, be in the classroom, visit the classroom, and to try to cut down, break down that dynamic, that change that happens. But to evaluate a lesson is to me, it's the most minuscule and almost meaningless of data points, right? So what I'm trying to do is collect more holistic data that comes through anecdotes, that comes through more check-ins in different spaces. But what we centered our meetings with teachers, our mid-year meetings with teachers around, were actually the essential questions that we had them build at the beginning of the year. So that's a huge part also of experiential learning, are our essential questions, and doing a check-in. We had the students actually do feedback rather than a course evaluation typical. It's just like, okay, this is the essential question of your class. How much do you feel like you've been dealing with it, and what do you understand about it further? What are questions that you've gained from? So getting feedback about those questions and then having this conversation about this is your big greater goal of the class, and then having conversations that are again grounded in like being open. What are your challenges? What are the things that you need to
Mhm.
continue to thrive? And then again, like I said,
Mhm.
co-creating that plan for learning and growing and moving forward, providing the resources. Oh, that's great that you said that. It happens to be that I know, there's this cool article about that, or let me connect you to this person in the community where we can have the kids engage in some real world learning around that, and
Mhm.
just how
Yeah.
what are the opportunities, and that's again a product of the experience that I've gained over the years and the opportunities that I've had, and then again going back to sort of the luxuries that I have within being able to connect with people on that level and support their growth in that way, so that because then they will speak to the mechanical issues that are going on that they have, like, oh, I'd really love to do that, but there's classroom management issues. Okay, and then we'll go into that versus going in, observing, and saying, well, I noticed that such and such was spinning around in their chair the whole time. What are you going to do about that?
Right? Yeah. I love that you recognize teachers are carrying a lot and that there's just the need to implement shiny new things can be really challenging. And then there's a commitment to, like you said, continue to come back to the purpose of the work and the frame so that people can continue to hold themselves accountable, but continue to know that like that you're very committed as a leader to the work.
And
Um,
hold me accountable to that too.
Yeah, and hold you accountable. And I want to talk a little bit about leadership because I just feel like, leaders, in my opinion, set the tone for their buildings. And I feel like, like leaders, I think there's a lot at your doorstep, obviously, between managing staff, parent expectations, serving students, making sure the kids are meeting standards and expectations. And I think, we're seeing a lot of changes around the country in school districts in regards to the work that folks are doing, maybe around equity and inclusion. And I'd like to just kind of know, like, how are you all intentionally holding that work in your school? Regardless of what's
Uh,
going on outside, because I feel like schools are little microcosms of the larger society. The issues
Absolutely.
outside find their way inside. And how are you staying true to like your mission and vision to serve your students, your babies, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd love to know more about that.
Well, the ideal is that we are the microcosm and not a bubble, right? And I've been in too many places where it's a bubble, and we talk about the real world, and when you get there, and sort of
Mhm.
it devalues the experience of the child in the moment of just, "Well, what do you mean? I'm sitting right next to you, and you're in the real world, but I'm not. How does that
Yeah,
work, right?"
yeah.
And so the work of DEIB and identity is everything. It's everything. It's who we bring to our, it's who we are. I'm super fortunate. My staff and faculty are two-thirds BIPOC.
Wow.
So we're different, right? We're different, and we have a head of school who's a person of color, and so when by nature our perspectives are going to be different. And for me, again, it's our PD that we just did the other day was entirely based on personal identity and who we are as teachers, and it was about storytelling of your educational journey, your personal educational journey, because that
Mhm.
absolutely inherently informs it. And I don't think we pay enough attention to that and speak to that,
Yes.
because teachers are probably teaching because they were probably good students, right? And but every teacher in the room wasn't a good student in the same way and for the same reason, right? There were certain
Mm,
things that their teachers valued that made them good students, and there were certain things that their parents and guardians promoted that made them want to be particular types of students. Or, I also have the teachers who say I was a terrible student, right? And so,
yeah.
all these things form our experiences and our approach. And so that to me is that morass that makes it so complicated to say, okay, well, we're all going to teach this way.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. So it's informed by our journey. So it's not that work is not something that we add on. It's core, and I make that very clear. It's part of our values. It's what we do. It informs everything that we do. It informs the decisions. It informs the institutional decisions. It informs how we manage and how we govern. So, I push back. I pride myself on being more of, I try to be a feminist leader. I try to use the feminist model of leadership, and I try to be, anti-hierarchical, anti-patriarchal, having a traditional, like, for example, the traditional organizational chart that's top down.
Yeah.
That's a message. right? And so
Mhm.
if a teacher sees that, and if I'm trying to encourage teacher leadership and teacher development and growth, they look at that chart. And so if I'm trying to open pathways for them, they're trying to see how they fit into that
Mhm.
chart. And so there are other ways to represent organizations. I happen to found one that's really that I think speaks more authentically to how we run. It's a little bit more of a functional chart. So it's not about like, okay, this title and this position that I'm trying to get. It's more like these are all the functions
Mhm.
that have to happen for a school. And so what can I do that I'm good at? And I borrowed from the work of Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who's a very renowned climate scientist. And she does a real simple thing about like unpacking and identifying the climate activists in yourself. And she has
Yeah.
three simple questions that I try to ground us in all the time, not just I do this with the faculty and I encourage it to do with the students. It's very simple. Like, what are you good at? What work
Mhm.
needs doing? And what brings you joy? And you create a Venn
Oh,
diagram of that, and then you
yeah.
find what that overlap is, and then
Yeah.
that's what you can do. So with that functional organizational chart, you can see what work needs being done, and
Yeah.
then you find that overlap of what you're good at, what brings you joy, because that's important, because then you're going to want to do it, not begrudgingly do it. And
Yeah.
then we can then identify pathways to leadership in that manner versus trying to fight each other to climb up that ladder, to climb up that hierarchical chart.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. So I find joy in this because it just speaks to the innovation that's available when you give yourself possibilities in the work, right? And also when you, as a seasoned leader, have seen things that haven't worked, and you're like, I'm gonna do it different when I'm somewhere else.
That's right. That's
I'm gonna
right.
do it different when I'm in charge, right?
Yep.
So I would love to know for district leaders listening to what you're saying, who actually want to really think about professional learning different, who want to inspire with innovation and joy and empathy and love, what would you tell them? What would you say is a critical piece to being able to successfully do that?
Yeah, again, it's placing placing all the value on the individual. Your work is not to make the school better, it's to make your teachers better. And when you make your teachers better, the school is going to be a lot better. That's my guarantee on that. So, our job is relational. And that's another quote that I love about leadership. Leadership is not about being great, it's about enabling others to be great. And the more so that we do that, then investing, like I said, investing that time and demonstrating that investment in that time in the individuals versus the systems, or whatever the priorities, you demonstrate your priorities, you put your priorities in the people who are on the ground, who are in front of their students every day, doing the tough work, having the difficult conversations, struggling with the student that they are trying to get to understand something or just to feel comfortable in a particular space. These are not easy things to grapple with on a daily basis, especially young minds, and especially with we look at the diversity of the students and the minds that we have at the school. It's no small task, right? And so we want to value that in the individual. So it's don't forget those roots. Another opportunity that I had was I went into administration, then I went back into the classroom, and that was probably in my professional career one of the most formative things that I could have done is to cycle back in, because you do if you're just in administration, you do lose sight, and it's always important for me to also to continue to teach for that reason.
Yeah, and stay connected. I like how you said you went in administration, came back, and stay
Yeah,
connected and rooted in the purpose of why you do the job you do. Knowing you
yeah,
can pull yourself out and know what needs to maybe change as a result of that, and support the teachers in a different way.
yeah.
And I also just think it's a credibility thing too, to know that you went back into the classroom
That's
after
right.
being in administration. It's
Yeah,
like, okay, cool, like you did the thing, and now you're back in administration doing it and supporting staff. So I have a question, and I always like to ask this because my background is in community organizing, and I spent 2 decades working with families and parents in the largest school district in Oregon. And I just like to know how parents show up in your space traditionally, how you have provided space for them to invite them in to talk about their students, how you do parent engagement work. Do you do it? What does it look like? I always like to leave people with some jewels around that
yeah,
because I think parents are sometimes and often an afterthought to the work we do in schools, and I feel like they're critical because I've heard narratives like parents of color don't care about their kids, they don't show up, and I know and you know that's not true. And I like to interrupt that because I think that that is not a good narrative to set. And I know that people are struggling. Everyone's trying to survive, and we're in a really different season. And so, how are you showing up to support parents in your school building?
Yeah, I mean, again, in an independent school, partnership is necessary. And so when
Mhm.
we're bringing students into the school, it's one of the things I speak to first is that, when you join us, it's not just your child that's joining us, the whole family is joining us, and you're joining our community together. So it's important to me. It's actually something that has been one of my challenges coming in is to because we come from a lot of different places physically, geographically.
Yeah.
And so trying to build community within the parents in different ways is important. So I have them come. We have our parent org meetings on campus, and then those are open for everyone. We have Zoom meetings and we have different opportunities. Obviously, we bring in parents for conferences. We bring in parents
Yeah.
for our different community events and celebrations. So we just had our we call it our winter jam right before the winter break, where we have our musical performances and arts exhibitions for our visual and performing arts. And
Nice.
we invite everybody to come in and be a part of that. So and within the classrooms, it's an important priority for our teachers to be in constant contact with our parents and our guardians, so that they are feeling connected and there's no surprises in the journey, and that again, we're trying to align and work together, and so that it's not like, oh, let me tell you this, there's something going on here
Right.
that I need to tell you about. It's just like, no, hey, can we figure this out together? I noticed this.
Yeah.
And
Partnership.
how can we work through this together? What can you tell me that's going to
Mhm.
help me um, uh, you know give me some extra support or some context for how I can help your child through this particular struggle, or let's celebrate, even better, let's celebrate together. Oh my gosh, they did something that just completely blew my mind, and I had to let you know about this. And so it's just encouraging that ongoing communication, and again, being in a smaller school, it's easier to keep up,
Yeah.
maintain regular contact.
Yes.
But regardless, it's always important. And when you're speaking to also BIPOC parents,
Yes.
it's unbelievable. I've been at bigger schools where the focus was on diversity, and we brought all these people in, and then like you go and you look at who's showing up at back to school night, right? Or when you show up at back to school, if they do show up to back to school night, where's everybody standing? Who's talking? Who's on
Yeah.
the outskirts, right? And
Yeah.
so that's, and then so now we bring in, okay, now okay, so now we talk about belonging, but like belonging where and with
Mhm.
whom,
Two.
right? And so, what does belonging look like here versus like if I'm trying to belong in a different community.
Yeah.
So I think being able to speak to that, and again, because of the diversity of our faculty, there's more empathy and perspective around the importance of bringing in all our families, regardless of where they're coming from.
That was so good. I'm so glad I asked that question. Thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely.
So I always like to ask what is called the final bell question, which is a call
Sure.
to action to those who are watching this.
Yeah.
So if every superintendent or school leader listening could commit to one concrete action to address just supporting teachers, maybe bringing in the framework that you're using at Tree Academy, what would you suggest that action be?
Yeah, I'm going back to what I've been talking about pretty much the whole time, right? It's just seeing the individuals. Especially I would imagine in the work of a superintendent, you're looking at schools, you're looking at systems, and that's part of my job too, right? It's in an independent school. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit, right? So there's the business aspect that I completely empathize with. But what is really important is that this is a this is the most human of work and jobs and endeavors, right? We're talking about
Mhm.
this responsibility of raising, nurturing, and educating our children. More, um, there's nothing higher stakes, there's nothing more rewarding and nothing more important to do than that. And it's just please remain, you know, just remain in touch with that aspect of it, and then what it takes to do that for the human beings who you are leading, for them to do that work. That is the key thing. And as much as you can, honor those individuals, understand, get to know, and see, and let them be seen, let them be heard. so that they are a part of it and that you're doing it together. And as we started off with, getting away from the top-down systems, but how do we work together in order to improve things? Because the landscape, as you mentioned, continues to shift, and we have to adapt. And with everything that's going on, the pressures that we have around with technology, of certainly being one of them, how are we going to stay true to this work that we do, this absolutely human endeavor that we take on as educators.
Mm. And with that, I want to thank you so much, Fu, for being here, for joining us, for engaging in the conversation. To folks listening, remember our progress in education isn't about doing more, it's about deepening what matters most. If you heard that throughout this podcast series with Fu, that's definitely, hopefully, it resonates with you. If you found the conversation valuable, please subscribe, stay up to date on YouTube. And if you want more information, I will link where you can find Fu and learn more about Tree Academy and the frameworks that he's using with his staff. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and propelling education forward. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Anchor.